A very good evening to all our viewers on Focus TV. You're watching Focus Tête-à-Tête, the show where we talk to women from across the globe who've made a mark in society. We hear their stories and listen to their views on women's issues from across the world. Today I have with me Countess Albina du Boisvray. She was a journalist, a noted award-winning film producer. In 1986, she suffered a personal tragedy, and after that she set up a humanitarian global organization called François-Xavier Banyou. This organization has been championing humanitarian causes across the globe, especially the rights of children affected with HIV/AIDS. Countess Albina, thank you so much. It's an honor to have you on Focus TV.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm very happy and honored myself.
Thank you, ma'am. Tell us about your organization, how it started, what it aims to achieve in society.
Well, first of all, it's called François-Xavier Banyou because it's the name of my son, who was a very committed helicopter rescue pilot. So he would rescue with his helicopter people who had accidents or who were in danger of dying in the mountains of Switzerland and in the desert of Africa. And we call it FXB because that's easier for everybody around the world to pronounce.
Yes.
The organization continues his commitment to rescuing, but in a large sense of the term, by focusing on what you just mentioned, which is the collateral damages, I call them, like in a war, I mean, the victims of the AIDS epidemic, the children who are either orphaned by the epidemic or who are affected by it or who are vulnerable to it. And that is what we've been focusing on for the past 20 years in various parts of the world, including India, for 18 years.
Tell us about your India experience. What kind of work has FXB India been doing?
Well, when I started FXB organization in 1989, I started first of all in the countries that were around me, America, Switzerland, France. And at the same time, I went to Africa in 1990 and discovered that there the pandemic had become like a tsunami, leaving so many lives in its wake and so many orphans. And one didn't even know who was infected or not infected. It didn't really matter because it was a whole population of children raised by the grandparents with a lot of difficulty and suffering. So then I started setting up the FXB village model, which is what we have now brought to India this year. And here in India, nobody really in those days understood or wanted to know that there was going to be an epidemic here as well, with the same consequences. But to get that understanding to the general level and to the political level, it wasn't easy.
I think that must have been your biggest challenge, because not only are people not too aware of HIV or AIDS, but there is a lot of stigma as well.
Yes, there is. There's a huge stigma. And you know, there's stigma all over the world. But in India, I find there is a terrible stigma, terrible discrimination still going on. I was with the network of positive people in Calcutta lately, and they were telling me how difficult it is. Still, there are 2,000 people. But still for them it's terribly difficult to fight against the stigma and the discrimination. I mean, I know of children also who have been barred from the schools because of it. It's families, as we all know. I mean, women very often are thrown out by the in-laws because when the husband dies, the in-laws figure that it's the woman who's given the infection to the man when it's the other way around, and they throw her out with her children. I mean, stigma and discrimination, I would say, are the biggest hurdles to really be efficient in fighting this epidemic and taking care of people.
Tell us about your challenges in some of the other countries.
Other challenges, come from different contexts, cultural contexts, social, economic contexts. Every country has its difficulties. For instance, in Thailand, where I started also at the same time as India, and I started with little houses of tender loving care for those orphans infected. I mean, the families, even when there were parents alive, still alive, let's say, and hadn't developed the disease, when the child was known at birth to be infected like the mother, I mean, the whole family would just abandon the child.
And sometimes you have to take very harsh decisions yourself when it comes to such cases, don't you?
Well, I have to take harsh decisions. I have to take sometimes, I would say, advocacy decisions that can go against the sensitivities of the culture, or can go against the sensitivities of the political and the government. But you have to. You know, the only two countries in the beginning of the epidemic, in Africa, Uganda, and in Asia, Thailand, who managed to keep their prevalence low in those days.
How?
Because there was a political will at the top. And they spoke so boldly. They spoke about the roads of transmission very openly. They spoke about the necessity of condoms very openly. They cut through all the taboos in ways that shocked people, but shook them up as well at the same time. And there was a reaction. And I think if you don't have a political will at the top to really address the problem openly and bluntly, you're going to advance, but you won't advance as well with such impact and as quickly as if you do have that. And the difficulty in India is that the health burden is state by state. So you would have to mobilize, which I tried to do at one point, every single health minister or chief minister.
At the federal level.
Exactly, and the federal level as well, but at each state level.
Tell us about FXB. What exactly is it doing for children? How are little children who have been affected, if not infected with HIV, how are you helping them deal with this?
What we helped with for 20 years. And I'm very happy because a study has just come out now called the Joint Learning Initiative on Children and HIV, done by experts, health ministers, UNICEF people, UNAIDS people, university people. Their findings and recommendations are in fact exactly what we've been doing for children for 20 years, meaning keep the children in the family. That's the best policy. Then give access to those children or that child to a package of integrated services. For me, it's the package of integrated services, just putting into action the access to the articles of the Convention of the Rights of the Child that countries have ratified, meaning they are themselves in the legal obligation of giving access to those rights. So that's what we do in an FXB village. We keep the children in the families and the communities. We give access through what is called in government language cash transfers, but I call it investment into people. We spend the money necessary for those children and their families to access all their needs, but we put it, and that's what we add to the recommendations of GLICA, we put it around the spending, the investment into an income-generating activity for which we train people so they can do it well. So that then, with that activity that grows, the second year, we don't bring in as much investment and much cash transfers. People already can pay certain things on their own because they're already making a little profit. Third year, they're making much more. Fourth year, they're on their own. And we have 85% success. So that's why I wanted absolutely to bring this model here to India, which we have done now in 5 places. 2 in West Bengal, 1 in the rural Medinipur, 1 in the city in the Dipadaba slum near Calcutta, 1 in Andhra Pradesh, Valluru, Vishakhapatnam, and 1 in Manipur, 1 in Mizoram.
All right. Well, it's time now for us to take a quick break. We'll be right back to talk about women in India and their issues with AIDS. Keep watching.